Hopefully we can. We'll find out. Maybe. If not, at least we are pretty sure it's working.
Yeah.
All right. I guess we're not able to see ourselves, although when I do it on my phone, I can. So, welcome to Coffee with a Therapist. I'm here with Andrew Jamison. He's a licensed professional counselor. And how long were you in the schools again? I feel like it was like 8 years?
4 years.
4 years. Oh, I don't
probably
know why.
Felt like 8 years.
In my brain, it was like longer. So I'm glad I checked with you.
Yeah.
But yeah, you've done a lot of work with kids and teens, and I mean, I'm talking about your background, but you'd probably be able to tell it even better than me. So tell me a little snippet of your background so people understand, like, kind of where you're coming from.
Yeah. So, you know, I went to a high school. Obviously, didn't know what I wanted to do. Predominantly white school, you know, and you know, getting out. Like I was a CDF student, you know, definitely non-athlete. Worked a lot of jobs, got in and out of the Army, and then I always enjoyed working with kids. I always enjoyed working with students. And so I just, you know, after some time and reflection, I decided to go that route and did the school counseling thing for a little while, but wanted more one-on-one time with people. So here I am. Very graciously.
Yes. Yeah. And I wanted to have some other people and other voices here because, you know, I love sharing and connecting with people, but I know that there's so much wisdom out there that I can glean from other people. And yeah, we're just a part of this whole community.
Definitely.
You talked to me a little bit about masculinity and you wanted to kind of go into that today. So first things first, what do you think would be important for people to know about that?
Man, you starting off with the hard questions.
Very general, I'm sure. You're like,
you know, I think the biggest thing that people, you know, should hopefully or would hopefully recognize, and I think men more so within themselves, is it's like, we got to change. You know, it's like there's been very much this like this thing of dominance and this thing of power and this thing of, and if it's not necessarily brought out on a physical scale, but like mentally and feeling like we can't talk about what's going on in our lives, you know, and I think that, you know, I know like me growing up with my friends, like we would, but it's like, man, it's like comparatively, like it's, when I think about being a therapist and when I think about just how much I've learned, you know, not only about other people, but about myself. It's like on a scale of 1 to 10, it's like those conversations I feel like that men are having are like on like a 2, you know, and like the advice that they're getting is probably like a 1 or a 2. You know what I mean?
From like other males or culture? Or, okay.
From other males. And definitely I feel like the culture is changing for the better. So, but you know, it's slow to progress. And I'm biased, of course, from my own experiences. Number one, it's like I obviously don't speak for all males. And, you know, there's a lot of things that go into that. So
yeah, and I've experienced how one of my friends is messaging me. I'm like, I should probably get that feature off my computer. I've experienced some men having a really high EQ and seeing that become more common. So I do want to give men credit there. And like, just generally speaking, I like to take the shame out of this because I think on both ends with women and men, we have to do better as far as like becoming healthier than culture. Because I think women too can kind of reinforce certain issues of masculinity, so to speak, because I think there's a lot of, when I think about masculinity, I think that women can possess those traits too, and there's positive of that. There's a lot of positives. So it's, I'm really talking about the negative traits of masculinity that can kind of show up in all of us, but that do culturally show up in men. And I think that sometimes the way that we respond to it as women, and I'm only speaking really for myself, but generally speaking, we see the trend in culture that women can kind of reinforce those at times too. And sometimes the way I feel like we have to take ownership of how we communicate about this, because what I've seen happen was, I'm very much like a humanist. And I would even consider that like my version of feminism, because I think certain waves of the feminist movement have gone too far and have really shamed and done bad things towards, you know, communicating the message of equality and actually hurt people, unfortunately. And so what I see when I look at it is just us being humanist and just talking about generally the issues of masculinity that show up in both genders, but predominantly men. And how that's related to culture and context. Because I think that men are only that way because
that's how
of their context. Like it totally makes sense to me. I don't think it's like this natural thing in men or that men are bad or vice versa with women and the ways that they struggle with certain issues culturally. So I think the context of our culture matters. But it's so cool having a guy talk about this because I'm like, yes, I get to get your perspective and maybe you can help connect the dots in ways that I struggle to because I come from my lens.
You know? Of course. Yeah, we all do.
Yeah. So like, can I ask a question that maybe you can answer better?
Hopefully.
Why? Okay. When you talked about like that 1 or 2, like where men typically are when it comes to like, is that like emotional intelligence or, you know, why is it important that they go from that to an 8 or a 9 or why change? Why is it important that become better for men?
Because I think, you know, and this is still one of the things that I'm learning is just like communication and it's obviously great to communicate with other people, but it just really boils down to like knowing ourselves. And one of the things that you'd mentioned was, you know, that idea of like younger generations sometimes like being more in touch, you know, and it's like I got a friend, or maybe you didn't say that exactly, but that's like what I pulled from that. Well, I shouldn't say necessarily pulled, but it's like that's what triggered this thought. And this thought is that I have a friend who's 26 and it's like, man, it's like that guy is so much more like emotionally in touch with himself. Like things that I feel like I'm just waking up to and evolving to, just like within the past 2 years, he was like putting it in such a way that like really made me understand that. And I think because of the more acceptance of even like the LGBT community and just broader cultures and different understandings as a whole, like I think younger generations are better. And I'm just speaking about my generation and obviously like looking at the generations behind. I think the younger generations are better than my generations, which is good. You know, I feel like they're more open, more receptive, less walled off. But I think to answer your question, I think it really just comes down to, you know, being able to understand ourselves more and then having the language to communicate from that point of understanding.
And I think, you know, when I hear kind of critiques about the way things are evolving, you know, what I hear is that people are getting soft.
Oh, yeah.
So, and I want to give that, obviously that's not how I think about it or how I'd frame it, but it's an interesting idea that, and maybe when people aren't really stepping into this in the way that I see as like a healthy way, like I would kind of agree with that in a way, but what do you think about like that kind of ideology that there's fears that men are losing their toughness or their strength or their...
I think it's a really good question. And the reason why I brought up the LGBT community specifically is because I remember it was like there was a lot of anti-gay slander, and you can imagine the words that were being used in the locker rooms all the time, and it's like that was a regular thing to call someone the other F word, you know, and it's like that was very, 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 very predominant daily. I would say hourly, you know, every you know, and then they say it, and so. And I think that identity of being a gay male is like associated with weakness and feminism. And that was kind of like the long held idea, and not necessarily feminism, but femininity. And so, which, you know, kind of detracted from that idea of like strength and toughness, to kind of allude to your question so far. I'll get there. And so I think that's maybe like where that idea of being like soft like first came from, is like people, like there was males that started standing up and being like, hey, that's not cool, you know, to use those, you know, those slurs like that. And so I think that's where kind of that idea of like the old male guard started being like, oh, you're soft is because I can't call you an anti-gay slur, you know, which is that's just my perspective. And that's what I got, because again, I think they equated like homosexuality with femininity, and that being weak and soft and not who we are as males, you know? And the funny thing is, you know, and it's like, I also come from a military background, and it's like, well, what's the definition, of being hard than of being tough? I think it's the ability to deal with things in a civil way, because it's like, we have organizations to do military operations. We have organizations to do police operations. And it's like, I think a part of being a good male is not only being in touch with who you are mentally and emotionally, but also like if that need arose to help someone, save someone, that we're physically prepared to do so, and that's one of the things I love about also, well, and just like, and like tough female culture is just like, you have that too. You know what I mean? Is like that ability to like, you have the strength, the mental tenacity, to step in, be it, a physical altercation. To me, that's toughness, but for justice, like for the right reasons, not just to go out and prove yourself in a bar fight,
right.
Not to do anything stupid like that, So I don't know. I feel like that was a super long answer.
Yeah, no, and I have to interject here and like admit that like, it's been interesting to see, because I'll give myself kudos that in times of trauma or in times where I've needed to step up, and even one time when my friend was held at knife point, I was able to still like have like that aggressive stance to scare the person away, luckily, and it didn't end up in a dumb thing where I actually just ended up getting hurt, right? And so I say that was like by luck too, that like in traumatic situations I've been able to step in and have that toughness. However, it's funny because sometimes in other areas I can really struggle with it, like using power tools or like other areas.
I don't know how to use power tools.
No, I know, but like,
not like all, basic stuff.
But it's stuff that I think too is still part of my own, like, because we've discussed this before. Like, I think sometimes because of the way I was raised as a female, and even like culturally speaking, and the different messages, not just like my family, but just culture in general, was it kind of, in certain areas I feel empowered, and then there's other areas where I'm still having to work through narratives of like, that's not what you do, or you asked for help to do that, or whatever, right? And so it's like even working on my own stuff to push through that so I can be a more whole person, because I think, generally speaking, I think there's beauty in femininity and masculinity when they're healthy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? And so, but I think what we see on both ends is unhealthy versions of that. And that's where people get like really caught up in like gender roles and like, well, this happens in this, and human nature is this. And, but what we actually, what people aren't looking at is the lens of culture and context.
Right.
And we just still have a culture that in subtle ways teaches women to believe one thing. And specifically because I work with eating disorders, I see a lot of the like, you are objectified based on what you look like. And that's more significant than anything else about you, right? And I'm not saying every woman believes that, but that's still perpetuated in our society. Just freaking look at, how many people have social media accounts based on how they look.
Right.
And then, and influencers that just sell products because they're pretty.
Right.
And then, for guys, there's still all these messages of like achievement and doing this and providing and being
and I would
tough.
say probably, if anything, probably the biggest identity that I feel like has prevailed in male culture is warrior identity.
Okay, tell me more about that.
Is this, and I think that also goes along with toughness. And I think that was also, it's like when we look back historically from a military standpoint, why like don't ask, don't tell, and homosexuality in the military was such a huge deal. And I'm glad that it's not now. And same way with transgender or anything. Because at the end of the day, my philosophy is if the soldier can do his job, his or her job, then what difference does it make? Or however they want to be, we just call them by their last names, hey, Jamison, hey, Helms, come here, And that's also kind of one of the cool things. I don't know. In some sense, it's like the uniform is a great equalizer. It's like if you've earned that uniform and you're here, then like you belong here. And that should be the mentality. Is that the mentality that's always taken? No. But just to back up to that identity of like warrior culture, I think it's very much like, looking back historically, it's like, this is who a man should be, like tough, strong, silent, and
silent in what way? Because I would say that like sometimes I think it's like in certain areas silent, but in other areas vocal.
Yeah. I think you make a good point. I don't know. I think that's kind of hard for me to speak on, just because in a lot of ways I feel like I'm removed from that identity. Like that's like the warrior mentality or ethos or whatever you want to say, is it's I don't know. And I'm only seeing it from my lens. I was just thinking that like I really don't subscribe to that idea, and I think along with that warrior ethos or mindset, sometimes not in the well. I was going to say not necessarily in the military. The values and ideals that the military instills is positive, and is a good thing. And again, there's good and bad people everywhere. But I guess just in terms of like toxicity to the point of maybe just staying in that toughness role. I don't know. That's a really, really tough question. There's a lot of things to unpack there.
Yeah. Well, and I'd imagine one of the biggest losses for men, if they're not able to kind of let go of some of that warrior mentality or find balance, right? Because I think there's, like you said, there's good from it.
Right.
But balancing that with also being in touch with their emotions and being able to communicate about them.
Yes.
Is that they're going to actually lose connection and intimacy in the world outside of war.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
And so that's, I think, where it's like a loneliness thing, right? And no one's really no one's calling it that, so I don't know how to better frame it, but it's more of like that feeling of not belonging maybe in civilian world, or whether or not somebody's gone into the army or not, like men just not feeling like they have deeper emotional connections in their lives. And they're just not in touch with that side of themselves. And I think a lot of men struggle to even find like a reason to connect with that emotional side.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I would say, yeah.
They're like, why? I'm getting my job done. I'm high performing, or I'm calculating my life based on these metrics of, money or success or climbing the ladder. And they're like, why do I need to be connected to people? And I think what they're not realizing is how lonely and how unsatisfying that is emotionally for them. And they're not going to say emotionally that's unsatisfying, but it may feel more like a void or like something's missing or struggling to connect deeply with their relationships. And again, they probably don't even know what that is. So when I say those words, they're like, no, I'm fine. But I'm like, once they start to connect those dots, or sometimes when trauma happens in their lives, that's when I have, the men that I work with can connect to those concepts, and they're like, that's exactly what it is. I feel lonely. I feel alone.
Yeah. And I think you're very right on that. And it kind of goes back to like really seeking something deeper within ourselves and that understanding and for that language and that communication. Because, that idea of loneliness, I think the first instinct for a lot of men is to be like, I'm not lonely. Like, I have friends.
I'm bored, I'm this, or I'm, or
it's like I have people I go to work and I talk to, and it's fine. And like, I got a buddy I'll hang out with and go drink with. And well, what do you guys do? Well, we watch sports and drink. What do you guys talk about? Well, nothing really. And so there's like that. And this is one of the things I feel like I've realized recently is it's like, I was sitting around, like one of my friends had ESPN on, and I was like, it hit me. I was like, ESPN is like a way for men to connect. But what's really cool is like they do these documentaries. They're called like 30 for 30s. Have you ever heard of it?
Yes. Yeah, no, Kyle introduced me to that. And I was like, he's like, I think you'll actually like this, because I'm not super connected to sports. Like I want to be, but I'm not struggle with that. And he's like, I think you'll like these. And so we watched one, and that was actually pretty interesting. It dragged on a little long, but it was...
Which one did you watch?
It was the one about the lacrosse players that were allegedly...
Was that Duke? I don't remember what school.
This is how bad I am at details sometimes. I don't recall. I think it might have been, but basically they were accused of sexually violating this woman and doing some other things at a party. And although the party was still, let's be real, not appropriate, and I went to the University of Georgia, so I know parties like that happened there, and they were still accused for things that were far beyond what actually happened, and it just kind of the way that unraveled their lives, and it was interesting.
They're good. I really enjoy it. But I think, like I said, I think that, and I do want to kudos, to everybody that, to every one of my friends, because every one of my friends, I feel like are really good about just like being open to having conversations about that stuff. And I think that's the other thing too, is I think that if people don't see themselves as maybe leaders, or if people don't see themselves as that type of person that can like open up and talk about those things and feel like it's okay to do so, you know, without calling someone some sort of like anti-gay slur or something like that, then I think that's just the land that they have to move towards breaching, you know, because it's so important that we do talk about things, and we know this as therapists, obviously, you know, but I don't think just how much people, when it goes back to that strong silent type, it's like, I don't talk about my problems, you know, everything is fine, I just drive on. Like that was kind of like one of the slogans in the military, is like, drive on, you know, it's like, just drive on. Like,
so is that where it is? They're quiet about their problems, they're quiet about their struggle, they're quiet about anything that's bothering them.
Absolutely. Because it doesn't matter. Drive on. Get the task accomplished. Mission accomplished. Drive on. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I've even heard it, you know, in different ways too, like, especially in today's climate of like, I feel like especially, well, maybe it's not so different, but in my mind it is, where if you put something out there, people can have all their opinions about it and kind of tear it apart and tear you apart, so to speak. That I've also seen people like kind of keeping things in, and not just on like social media, but I think sometimes around friends too, just being like, I don't want my argument picked apart.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't want to, like, it's vulnerable.
Absolutely.
It's vulnerable.
Yeah. And so just to kind of give a little bit more background about my history, like I got bullied a lot from like 7th grade to like my junior high year. And so I had to really learn how to be comfortable in an uncomfortable space. And so I think doing that and learning how to approach those topics, and I think also, you know, and you could relate this even from a historical level of war, you know, it's like the point of a conversation isn't to win. You know, and so I think a lot of guys
tell that to a lot of people.
Well, a lot of people, yeah.
That's a struggle for them, myself included. Sometimes, it's hard.
Yeah, and so, you know, it's like the point that I made about war is that idea. It's like when we look back, it's like even before people could communicate effectively, it's like, why do we want to win? Well, because we could survive. And so I think that now that so much of that war and tribalism and things like that are really past us. You know, we're still trying to hold on to this identity of winning because, I mean, for whatever reasons, I'm not going to get into the mix of that. And so it's like, I'm afraid to talk about things because I'm afraid to be wrong. And I think that's also one of the things that I have a real issue with in some of the education systems is it's like, and you know, it's like, I don't know every teacher, right? But I know, like, I'll just speak from my own experience, and maybe this is completely misintended. You know, is it's like either you're right or you're wrong, you know? And it's like that mentality I feel like only pervades throughout education. And I can't say for the education system today, you know, in a big way, because I mean, I'm not a teacher. Like I don't know. I was a high school counselor. And so I think I can't speak on teachers. I know a lot of good teachers, no doubt, you know, but in terms of, you know, I don't know how much of it is like, I really feel like the script needs to change instead of like right and wrong versus like, this is a learning opportunity.
Yes.
You know, and instead of being like, you were wrong, go back and do it again, you know, or this is wrong, or let me show you how I can help you with this. And that also goes into grading and a bunch of stuff I'm not going to get into. I'm not even sure how I got on that track. Actually,
right. No, but it's true.
Oh, but right and wrong.
That's how
we
are learning how to think about things or what's rewarded or not rewarded in our culture.
Yeah.
Including the right way to do, like I've heard kids talk about if they do something different in math as far as the way they get to their answer, but it's not the way that they were taught, they'll get points taken off their test.
Yeah.
And I'm like, isn't that like squelching like people's ability to be creative?
Right.
And think outside the box.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's saying don't think outside the box. You have to do it our way. Mm-hmm. And yeah, like you said, instead of embracing and also understanding context as learning opportunities when a kid does say, you know, a wrong answer or says something, you know, incorrectly, to explore that further and kind of where they're coming from versus immediately shutting them down. And I mean, like, wrong, Sarah, you know, wrong, Timmy, you know, it's like, okay, like.
Right, yeah. I think that's really kind of where I get that idea from of, you know, right and wrong and winning is because it's like, I think that's really kind of first taught in schools, but not necessarily or always by the teachers. You know, I think it's first taught by their peers. You know, and also if those peers aren't being shut down for berating someone for being wrong, that mentality only continues. Is it's like, I don't want to open my mouth because I'm afraid that I'm going to be wrong. And being wrong is the worst possible thing that anybody could be, you know? And so I think kind of going back to that idea of masculinity, it's like, not only I think are there some of that expectations of it's just like, hey, you handle your shit and you drive on, but and maybe but if you're not doing it effectively and with professionals, like you're missing so much. You're missing so much.
Yeah.
And not like missing, like as in that's a bad thing, like a missing answer, but it's like, man, you could be living in such a more awesome like way to see things on such a different and bigger scale, just have life have more depth, you know? So I feel like that's a lot of the things that just in terms of like masculinity and like warrior culture of just like drive on, get it done, you know, it's like I said, I think things are changing in a positive way. I see a lot of good things in male culture, and of course just like how we treat women, you know? I mean, and I think that also goes along with, you know, being in touch with ourselves emotionally. And it's like, I know for myself personally, it's like, I guess you could say, I'm not really even sure if I knew what love was, you know? And I'm not going to get into a whole lot about that, but it's like, I think myself probably included, it's like our only idea of love sometimes, or maybe for me at a higher level, is because it's like that physical connection, you know? And so I think men, and I don't know, I could be wrong in this, but I would assume, and I'll just speak for myself, that it's like, I think I sought that physical connection with other people so much because that was my way to maybe unlock myself emotionally, you know? And then, of course, then after you're done, then you're kind of like on cloud 9 and everything feels great. And, but then, yeah. And so I don't know, maybe, but there again, that also goes with like how we view women, you know, and are we using them just to get our needs fulfilled, you know? And it's like, and that's not right, because it's like, they're people, and we're all people, and we need to treat everyone with the same level of respect and understand. And I think that's another issue too, and I'm touching on a lot of points, I'm sorry, is that idea of like, because we're not maybe as emotionally evolved, that doesn't exclude us from trying to understand how another person might feel, whether they're a man, woman, whatever, to, you know, be with them to get our needs met, and then deuces, you know. I think that's pretty common in male culture too, because I think because we don't know what love is, and because we don't know what a lot of those deep, intricate feelings are, and attachment and trust and safety and all those different things really mean to us, because it's kind of our world in one sense, then we can be like, that was fun, see you later, you know? You know, and that's also, I think, where you just have to communicate with your partner, you know, and just be like, hey, like, where are you at with this? Because this is what I want, you know? And when it comes to that point, and are you cool with that too? And is this what you want? And then, you know, it's like, and if it reaches that point, you guys can come to an agreement, then sure, whatever. And so there again, I think, and there again, it's like, I think men not maybe having some of those stronger ideas or emotional understanding, just in the people that I've encountered and myself, to try and communicate what we want, it's like, well, I don't know, you know, because it's like, because I don't know what that thing is.
Right.
Like,
you don't even have a language.
Right.
Because
it's like, because it's like, I trust myself. I feel safe with myself. You know, I'm fine in my environment. You know, I own this jungle, you know? So it's kind of like, why I don't see, I think some people are like, and I know I was when I was in my younger years, it's like, I don't see maybe the value in taking that step if I feel like I'm already getting everything out of my life right now that I need. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Do you, like, I guess we'll kind of wrap it up here because I know we've probably already gone on for quite some time. But I do want to say, I mean, I think all that we've talked about is super important, and so it's worth it. Like, Louis Causalini, and I hope I'm saying his name right, he does neurointerpersonal biology. And he studies that. And he talks about, and this is true for men and women, that if we substitute love for something else, we can never get enough.
Yeah, I can see that 100%.
And that's just kind of how our brain is wired.
And then we just cycle.
I think if men struggle to get love or like a deeper version of love or the real deal, they will seek after these false versions in different ways.
Absolutely.
And maybe that's in their sex life or their work life
I can
or
see that
addiction.
myself.
You know,
100%.
Yeah, we all have our different areas where we have to kind of really look at ourselves and say, is this an area where I'm just kind of substituting love?
Yeah.
And I could see that being kind of where that loneliness builds to, is like just trying to get their needs met through love in the way that culture tells them love is, right? Or they understand it from their background. And then being like, I can't get enough of that, like in a sense, right? Or like knowing it's so short and fleeting until the next hit of that. Because I've seen... Like, the common narrative is, like, men have a higher sex drive, even. Let's just be real and, like, throw those terms out, right? And so part of me is like, yes, there's probably the biological dimension of it, but how much of it is also maybe...
That emotional component.
That's where they get their emotional needs met. So, of course, they have a higher sex drive. And women are like, we got it. Like, we're getting it in different ways. And it's seen as more of a physical problem than really understanding the whole of it. And again, I don't want to downplay the science and the physical stuff behind it, because, you know, I love the science, but I think it's a both and thing.
I think so too.
And I think people will frame it just as one because it's easier to look at it that way.
100%.
So anyway, this was an amazing conversation. I'm definitely going to have you back and talk about more things.
Definitely. Devin, I'd love to answer your question too. I don't know if we want to do that today. I don't know.
Someone hasn't showing the emotional side. I think she was referring back to the question about the silent soldier. So, like, she's asking, so silent as in, like, they're silent about their emotions? Definitely silent about those emotions. It's a great question.
I really liked what you said, even though a lot of women can be just as good as a male mechanic. Absolutely. You know, and it's like... it's like there was 3 female. Well, actually, that was the first graduating class. There was like 3 female Army Rangers. You know, I mean, those are elite special forces. You know, it's like, that's what I'm saying. Like, women are tough, super tough. You know, and it's like, and I think that also goes along with that mentality of, it's like, what else could they do if they didn't have that thing like weighing down on them? You know, since the beginning of time, and being like, you're not as tough as us, though, you know?
Right. Or having different, I mean, or even honoring that there might be even physically different strengths or a different mental toughness that serves different purposes. I would even, I don't know if Coach John will watch this, I'll tell him to watch it, but he was talking to me today about, we had this workout, and it was like every 15 seconds we had to do 3 reps of an Olympic movement, basically, anyway, it was pretty high intensity, and it was really about your mindset. And he said far and above, the women excelled, and the men struggled to really have that high pain tolerance. So it's really interesting how in the physical world we're like, oh well, men are superior in this way, but when you look at different tests, and I'm not saying women are necessarily superior, that's not my point. My point is that the narrative is just so powerful in changing how we look at the science versus actually looking at the science of it and the data and experience. So there's strengths to both.
Absolutely.
Well, cool. Thank you for staying tuned with us. We hope you have a wonderful Tuesday, and we will check in with you tomorrow.